certainly a big day at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. There you would have seen former Free State Human Settlements MEC Mosebenzi Zwane, and of course there was also another big talking point that is going to be here on News at Prime tonight. We're going to be looking at the issue of corruption, and that of course is also tied to the evidence that we would have heard of course then throughout the day from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. We'll also be speaking to some of those at the forefront of ensuring that ex-offenders are indeed rehabilitated, and what kind of programs are in place to ensure that when they come out, they are, of course, integrated back into society, and also ensuring that those programs are indeed, acted upon to ensure that they are then finding themselves in somewhat of a place in the world. We're going to be speaking to ex-offenders and also some of those that are drawing up such of these curriculums, just to get a sense of what exactly goes into it. But of course, our top story tonight, former Free State Human Settlements MEC Mosebenzi Zwane has rejected the suggestion that he should be held accountable if it is found that the 2010 low-cost housing tender process was unlawful. He has further defended contradictions in the numbers of houses the department built under his watch in December 2010. Zwane claimed he opened 50 houses, either completed or close to completion. But the Commission of Inquiry has challenged Zwane based on his statement that his then department released in the same period, claiming that hundreds of houses had been built. For more on this story, I'm now joined in studio by Tumaula Mohlaudi, who has been following developments very closely. Tumaula, certainly not an easy day for Mosebenzi Zwane, as he has now to go back to that time when he was the Human Settlements MEC in the Free State, and certainly answering very difficult questions. And I mean, one of the startling things was him not knowing that there was a Housing Act.
Absolutely, Bongiwe, and I think that this is one of the things that really even shocked Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo to say, how can you go into a position of senior government leadership and not basically do your research and find out which laws govern which operations, because you're going to have to be the political head that's going to be held accountable and going to have to oversee some of those policies that government comes up with and how they are implemented. What Zwane's response was basically very wishy-washy. You could hear by the way that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was pushing him to try to come to the point that, in terms of accountability, the buck did stop with him. What Mosebenzi Zwane was saying is that at the time when he was then put into the position, he had to make sure things happened very quickly, and he wasn't really concerned about worrying too much about legislation, because he was more worried about service delivery, and that the interests of the people was what he was more focused on. If we listen closely to what we say, we're going to just play a clip that just speaks to how this issue of the irregular awarding of the housing tenders played out.
Chair, I hear the concern you say. Normally the process is that when you arrive in a particular department, you are welcomed in that department by the head of the department, and with time your first induction will be to be given tools that you are going to work around. Tools like your constitution, what affects us in this department, its section so. Because at that point, you may not know the Housing Code and the Housing Act and other policies that might be there forming part of what you need to know, unless you are taken into speed on these issues. And that process did take place.
Did the HOD or some of the officials give you maybe a pack or file that had all the existing policies of the department that you might have to know about, including legislation, maybe PFMA they put in, but they didn't put in the Housing Act? Did they do anything like that?
I may not recall in terms of the package, Chair, but in my recollection, I did get that. In my recollection.
You did that yourself?
No, I did get.
Oh, you did get such a pack, yeah?
Yes, Chair.
In my recollection, I did get a pack. Certainly, it boggles the mind that if you have the pack, why not read it? But Tumaula, I want us to talk about, this particular part where he says that he was more concerned about service delivery. Yes. But at the same time, talking about service delivery in and itself, there's a statement that was released by his then department at the time about the number of houses that he would have opened or would have handed over. But now, fast forward to 2020, it now appears that even that service delivery in itself is still hanging by a thread. Absolutely, because the statement that the department had released indicated that hundreds of houses had been handed over. What Mosebenzi Zwane then tried to backtrack upon is that he says that he went and he handed over houses, and he himself then only found that the ones that were completed only accounted to a handful, probably about 50, which is a fraction of what the statement said. In his defense, he tried to justify it by saying that the statement also spoke to include those that were still in constructions and those that were not necessarily incomplete. What the Deputy Chief Justice and the evidence leader then pushed him back on is the fact that as, again, the political head of the department, he should have known better, because he should have gone and interrogated the statement to say, but I've seen something else. How could this then be reflected in a statement that was released by the HODs and various other officials, which he now fingers as saying that they are the ones who are to blame because they released a statement which he didn't care to interrogate. And it certainly doesn't look like the Deputy Chief Justice was impressed with some of his answers. Certainly not very, very impressed with some of his answers. And again, reminding Mr. Zwane that, the buck really stopped with him. Pointing fingers at officials who were accounting to him, essentially, is basically him just taking responsibility. So let's hear what he had to say.
It is a matter of concern to me that there would be an act, and it's called the Housing Act, that applies in the provinces as well, that the MEC responsible for human settlements doesn't know about for more than a year in office. So it is a matter of concern to me to say, what brings about such a situation? Because an MEC, of course he might not be a lawyer, but an MEC who comes in, same thing with a minister who comes into a certain portfolio, one would expect that they would want to be informed of all legislation that is relevant to their portfolio, and so that they are familiar with them. Certainly not mincing his words there, Tumaula, but one of the things that when you look at this evidence, particularly concerning the Free State and some of the officials that have come forward to testify, there does appear to be some kind of a finger pointing that is happening. I mean, you're seeing HODs, that, it's either one will point to an official, the official will point to this one, this one will point to the accounting officer. What exactly do we know about what each party has been saying about the other? Well, we do know that as far as the HODs are concerned, one was saying that in terms of his scope of responsibility, he was on his way out, and therefore his predecessor was supposed to be the one who then overtook the process, and as he was on his way out, he had no real grounds to challenge it. Now, the next gentleman to testify before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry then said that, in fact, as far as he was concerned, the MEC, Mosebenzi Zwane, is the one who insisted that this list that is right at the heart of this whole particular testimony, a list of preferred service providers, people who essentially did not have any experience in terms of the delivery of the kind of housing backlogs that they were trying to address, were the ones that were preferred, about 100 or just over 100 of them. Some of them had no previous background. He says that Mosebenzi Zwane insisted that these people be the ones that are tasked by
being given these contracts and that they be paid up front. So the HODs are basically putting the blame squarely back at his doorstep. But as you heard, he did not even necessarily understand the mechanisms which empowered him to basically oversee the process as MEC, not having gone through the legislation. And this was his defense, to say these guys were supposed to advise me as MEC and they threw me under the bus. But they are saying no, as MEC, he knew better and insisted that despite the law, he wanted to do things the way that he saw fit.
As a final question from me, have they gotten that money back?
Unfortunately, the money has not been returned. There are still legal processes that are trying to basically recoup those losses out of the 500 million that was paid out upfront, and of course the other balance of other monies, which make it about 1 billion. So far, the processes are now in front of court, and not a dime has been